Welcome to RFI's Banking Uncovered, the podcast going behind the industry PR, the media spin, the product awards and the investor reports to look at what's really going on in the customer data and to ask global thought leaders about their thoughts and views on the future of banking and payments.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Banking Uncovered with me, Jon Ruston. I spearhead all of our business banking and commercial banking insights here at RFI, and therefore it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our next guest on the podcast, which is Claire May. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we kickstart, I'm really excited to diving into, Claire, what feels like a topic which has really re-emerged of interest over the last 2 to 3 years, which is the role of, relationship managers in the business banking and commercial banking space. I'm super excited to get stuck into that. Some really interesting insights which we'll be sharing. However, before we kickstart, are you okay to give our listeners an introduction to yourself and your role at Santander?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. As you say, my name's Claire May. I head up the commercial clients business for Santander UK Bank. And that basically means we look after businesses of sort of 2 million turnover up to around 25 million turnover. So we're really at the forefront of SME businesses and growth in the UK. And we have 6 regions across the country. 40 relationship directors and 20 relationship managers who really lead those relationship teams and support our clients. Always been in banking, Jon. So a bit about me, just always been in banking, always been in corporate and commercial banking in various roles, lots of leadership roles, sort of frontline teams with a short few roles in risk and latterly in data and transformation, which I'm sure we're going to touch on some of those bits as we go through today.
Absolutely. Great. And welcome again. It's great to have you with us. Before we kickstart, and again, we'll frame our discussion around the re-emergence of the relationship manager, so to speak. It's something which has become increasingly top of mind from our perspective. However, we wanted to recognise over the last couple of months or so, we hosted our inaugural RFI UK Banking and Finance Awards. And Santander picked up the big scoops of best business loan services and best relationship managers. So if you could, just touch on, reflect upon what that means ultimately, for you all at Santander, as essentially, those awards were driven and underpinned by our voice of customer data. So essentially, being voted the best in those two aspects by your own customers must be extremely, extremely satisfying.
Massively satisfying, and everything we are doing to make things better for our clients. So I think it was just great recognition of the hard work we've put in around the support and the quality of the relationship teams in place. We feel that is really important, and over the past sort of 18 months in particular, but in particular in 2025, we designed a bespoke training program for our client-facing teams because we felt that although they were already delivering great service, we could elevate that even further, so we could make those conversations even more valuable for the clients that we were supporting. And actually, this award came, off the back of what felt like a massive investment in time, and sometimes you don't know whether that's all going to pay off. And it felt great to sort of hear from our clients that actually the support that they were getting from the relationship teams really was making a difference. And also on the transformation side, on the other award that was we were recognised for, we've invested a huge amount in our infrastructure and our transformation journey. So that was also particularly good to hear that we're getting that right for our clients as well.
That's great to hear. And that's essentially sentiment which is echoed within our voice of customer data, essentially. And particularly, you mentioned the focus on the value that you've been putting and, potentially upskilling client-facing teams to demonstrate more value to customers. And particularly brings us on to the first point around, the evolution of the RM role, essentially, given that we continue to witness a huge acceleration towards digital channels. We know that online banking, and in particularly mobile, is being used ever more frequently. And for day-to-day tasks, they are by far the most dominant dominant channels that businesses engage with. However, not only have digital expectations grown with that increasing usage, but what we see within our insights, Claire, is actually that expectations of human expertise have also evolved in parallel. So they're dragging up the expectations of what you may get from an RM, so to speak. So what's your take on how that landscape has shifted over the last 4 to 5 years, given the wider context of digital and how the RM landscape has changed? What triggered Santander to place that extra value on the RM relationship?
So I think you just touched on a couple of points that are really interesting, and then I'll sort of come to that point that actually it's quite a misconception that just because you're a corporate or a commercial or a business customer, you don't want self-serve, that you want this bespoke, only human interaction. And that is just not the case. And research that you did, that we did sort of together, and we used some of your research, really gave us that indication that our clients, big, small, all of them, regardless of size, want to be able to have information at their fingertips, be able to self-serve for the basic things.
Yes.
So that actually when they contact us, it's for the moments that matter. It's for the things that they do need our support and guidance and time to spend with them. So that was at the beginning of when we designed this sort of training program. That was a really brilliant insight that we used. So to use on our transformation of where our clients needed to self-serve, and then also what we needed our relationship teams to really focus on. So that led us to how can we make sure that we're moving our relationship teams away from things that just are not value add, either for themselves or for our clients. So I think that's the main evolution that we've seen. It is around, and I think the tricky thing to bear in mind here is for every client that could be quite different. So
Yes.
For one client, just doing a loan for the first time is they want handheld. For another, they just want to be able to click a few buttons and have an answer immediately. It's different for every client. And being a relationship-led bank, that's what we get right. That's what we can anticipate. We know our clients and we know which ones need the support at which point. For example, when they're growing internationally, for a client that's literally at the start of that journey, there is a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of bureaucracy that they need some support and help with. Whereas others, that's just in their DNA now. They've got teams that help them. They don't need us for that, but it will be for something else. So it really isn't a one size fits all, but what underpins it is our ability to really listen and react to what our clients need. But the basic servicing is not where we should be spending our time.
Yeah, it's a couple of really interesting points there, Claire, particularly around those moments that matter, where you can actually add value as a relationship manager, where those operational complexities grow. Brings us on to a couple of extra points, really, and something which we see within our data is around enabling that as frictionless experience as possible. We see that surfacing within our insights, and touching on something that you see there, when you look across some typical tasks that a business may perform, they're very happy to self-serve when it comes to looking for initial product information, applying for more straightforward accounts such as a business checking account or an additional account. But when their complexities attached, such as applying for a loan, like you said, or even seeking advice, human expertise by far outweighs digital in terms of preference with what we see within our data. And you mentioned there about enabling that proactivity and having that agility to essentially have that frictionless experience and enable the customer and the business to have the right channel at the right time. How do you facilitate that? Where do you start in thinking, okay, we need to be agile, but how do we actually put that into practice?
So I think in terms of looking after our clients, we are huge believers in embracing the digital tools that are available to us. So as a bank as a whole, but in particular in CCB, we've made a huge investment into ChatGPT licenses for our frontline teams. And the reason that we wanted to put that there is not to suddenly make them more efficient or remove roles or anything like that. It was very, very specifically to elevate the conversations. And we feel that if you are and I think it's been quoted somewhere that AI should just make a great person amazing or a good person great. I can't remember exactly what the quote was. And that's the approach we've taken with something like ChatGPT. Because if you think about traditionally, you do your prep for your client meetings, you do your own research, you're looking at various things. Actually, what ChatGPT is does all of that research and puts it in a place pretty quickly. So you've already saved your time. You can then spend your time preparing for how to use that information. What's the agenda points? What's the brilliant challenge that you can bring to that SME or that business today, that will challenge their thinking? That won't just be taking a list of things that they need from a bank, but actually going, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So that's a really good example of how we're taking digital innovation and saying, how can we make ourselves even better? But we are still, to the core, relationship led, and you've got a human in the loop. I think another great example is, we've just launched a digital lending platform for our more simple lending requests. But again, that doesn't mean that we are not available if it doesn't quite fit, or the client needs a bit of help, or they want to talk about which product is appropriate for their working capital need or their longer term funding need. So it's back to where I started this conversation with you, Jon. I think it is just really understanding and how to respond to the client in front of you, because they are all slightly different.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more with that as well. And a couple of interesting points would definitely come back onto the way artificial intelligence is being used and to facilitate the end customer experience ultimately, but also, with relationship manager led teams. But it brings us, it'll be interesting to get your take on this, Claire, of, traditionally across the market, there may be essentially a line drawn in the sand of where a business may typically have access to relationship manager, for example, using 5 million or 10 million in turnover as a potential cutoff. But from hearing what you've said there, actually, it could be easier said than done than putting it into practice, but it's more driven by operational complexities and moments that matter, or their international expertise. That's where you can add the biggest level of value. You can't just look at one sort of, it's not a binary conversation anymore, is it?
Completely. And you've hit the nail on the head. So the way that we operate at Santander, which is, I think, quite different in the market, is around complexity. So whilst at the beginning I said typically the businesses we look after in commercial have a sort of 2 million turnover up to 25 million turnover, we are not slaves to that. And actually what we're driven by is what our clients need at that moment in time. And it is driven by complexity. And actually some of our larger clients, but with more of an infrastructure, really don't want or need at that moment massive involvement from their bank. What's more important to them is something really slick, really easy to use, etc. But a client that's literally looking to go overseas for the first time, or get themselves ready for a critical sale for the first time, anything like that, they suddenly fit into, actually, they need a little bit more support from us. So we see that the relationship team is really the connector. They should bring to the customer maybe the things they don't know, things they're not aware of. We do not expect them to understand all the intricacies of a bank. So really, it's like the GP. They should be going, okay, actually, what you need, I've got a hold of what your problem is. So actually, let's think about this in what do you need from cash management? But we're trying not to then speak back in jargon. It's just like, this is the issue that we're dealing with. This is what I think could solve it. And that is definitely, it's not just about what you turn over. It is about what you need at that moment.
100%. No, absolutely perfect. Yeah. So picking up on a couple of other things you said there around different operational complexities or different size businesses, and something which really stood out was around, kind of the jargon which is used potentially, or speaking in the business's language. And picking up on another couple of points you made there, Claire, which are really interesting, speaking about the moments that really matter. From your side of things, what are those moments that really do stand out? You mentioned a couple in terms of launching internationally, but where are those where you sit back and go, the RM really did make a significant difference there? What specifically are those moments that can really turn the dial?
So I think I've mentioned a few which are more sort of the commercials, but there's also the human element here that really that really is important. So often when you talk about businesses, it can feel a bit unpersonal because you're talking about the business, but actually every business is run by fantastic people, and those people at various times in their life, just like our personal clients, will have moments of vulnerability, moments of, even if it's not, in the traditional sense, they need a little bit more extra care and attention. Bereavement is a key journey or key like moment, or I call it a journey. That's banking jargon. I've done my own thing there, but a key moment for the client where actually they just need a little bit of extra support. Fraud is another one. Internal or external fraud is another one where, clients, even if they can self-serve and report something, they will still often want that reassurance of, I've spoken to a human, I've spoken to my relationship team, they know what's going on, I'm reassured that we've stopped everything we need to do, that we're doing what we need to do, etc., etc. I've made my first, trade facility and I'm waiting for the shipment and I want to have a bit of extra communication. There's all sorts of moments that for our clients, there is a need for a human in the loop of whatever digital sort of process we put in place.
Yeah, 100%. That sounds, completely resonates with what we see within our customer data as well. It's those kind of moments that pop up, or being able to solve a query. I mentioned earlier around, expectations of digital rising because of the rapid acceleration that we're seeing. But therefore, because so much more can be done and self-served digitally, when, a business or any customer gets in touch with a human point of contact, they're actually expecting them to be able to help solve that straight away. So some of the things that are really in demand are, having that strategic dialogue at the right time, at the right moment. But also we're starting to see, Claire, as well, there's a huge demand across the board from a digital perspective and from relationship manager driven for a greater level of proactivity in engagement. So we see that as our top driver of relationship manager advocacy, but quite often across the market, that's something which falls below expectations. Is that something that you're conscious of, or you're trying to build into your service model of actually, we need to be knowing everything we can about the business so we can operate at those moments? Not that the business would not expect you to reach out, but so we can actually be proactive at all of the things that you've said there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're there and reacting to when our clients need us, but we also operate in a very proactive way. So we do that in two ways. We have a sort of, I suppose, moments, check-in points that if we haven't heard from a client for a period of time, we will always make sure that we reach out at least every few months, every 3 months. But we also are increasingly using data to prompt and trigger, so that we can get ahead of when a client might need us. And we see that is where you start to create real wow moments, because instead of them having to go, oh, on my to-do list, I must do that, or now I've built up a bit of cash, I must talk to my bank about whether there's a better way for me to be taking advantage of some better interest rates on that. Why should they be thinking about that? We could see that they're built up some cash. We should be proactively, reaching out to them and saying, notice this, shall we chat about it? Is there some opportunity? Do you want to hear about this? Let's take some stuff off their to-do list. They've got enough with running their business. And what's fantastic is we work hand in glove with our data team. And I think because of the previous role I did, I'm sort of hugely passionate about really using the data that we've got available to us. And I see in the next 5 years, this is where we really get into an exciting realm. And I think more and more we can expect more personalization, more proactivity, and just making these things feel easier for our clients. So they've not got to think like a banker. It can just be a conversation. That's the aim.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds good. And that's something we see, again, resonate strongly within our voice of customer insights as well. Picking up on a couple of points you made there, Claire, which really resonated with me and I found really interesting. We were around, the level of proactivity, how you reach out using data to inform those decisions. What type of information, in thinking about the digital transformation journey here as well, what type of information is best shared digitally via an established size business, so to speak, and which are the best ones to to root through human interaction? Because there's a case here as well that, you know, digital can be used as that enabler to enhance proactivity. But at what point, where do you then sprinkle in the human expertise?
I think this is the million dollar question, isn't it? Because as we keep saying, every client is slightly different.
Yeah.
So we're experimenting with various things at the moment. So, you know, how does it work when we email out and just to highlight that we've noticed something and actually there could be a suitable product for them, or there's a solution to something they're doing. And so we're sort of monitoring, how does that land? Does that land well? Is it better when we then follow up with a conversation? In which case, how? And the last thing we want to do, and we've all been consumers where we get bombarded digitally, and actually that's not a great outcome either for our clients. So we are hugely mindful of ensuring that we get that balance right. So we talk to our clients a lot. We sort of make sure that we sort of know what their voice is, what they want, what they don't want. We use research, we use the voice of the client a huge amount as we're developing any solutions. But I do think we need to make sure that we keep going back to the voice of the client is telling us that for basic things they do want it to be easy. If you've already got my data, use that data to fill it. I don't want to be asked for it again. So they're the elements for our, you know, some of our key journeys that we're starting to look, how can we use the data that we've got? So the lending portal that I mentioned, it's like, okay, there's a lot of public data when you create a limited company. How can we make sure we use that in a really efficient way? So actually we're gathering what we've got, and then it's the client either validating or filling in the gaps. That's a much better experience for both us and the client. So that for me is where I think we're still finding our way a little bit on what exactly works. But we're well on the journey with knowing the pain points, especially around data collection, that irritate clients and we need to eliminate.
Perfect. Absolutely. Picking up on that again, pain points is something we talk about a lot at RFI. Something we often say, but particularly as a few pieces of information there, nuggets that you dropped in, Claire, which really lead us towards, is, you know, essentially service innovation. Because I think sometimes when we talk about innovation, we immediately think about digital. We immediately think about something shiny and new, which could reinvent the wheel. But something we always say is, you know, innovation is identifying customer pain points and solving them to have ultimately a tangible impact on customer experience. Personalization is at the forefront of innovation, and dare I say, and if I may, Claire, dive into your thoughts on artificial intelligence. It's impossible to ignore the role that it's going to play. It's already shaping innovation. You know, how it's going to shape innovation in the short term and the long term is absolutely fascinating. So first of all, I'd love to pick your brain, and, you know, ultimately you've spoken about some of the ways in which you're using AI already. Because I think there's an immediate threat, and there's always a prevailing sense of fear, isn't there? That when we speak about AI in banking, it's, you know, there's security risks, or it's going to replace human contact, and we don't want to lose human touch. But do you see AI as an enabler, you know, as an opportunity essentially in servicing and in relationship management, or a threat? What do you think overall? What's your take on this?
So I am definitely in the opportunity camp. I think massively shaped by, you know, over 4 years spent with the data and the digital transformation teams. Hugely excited about the advances we're making around the use of data, but, you know, more recently, that developing into the use of AI and what we're doing there. So I'm definitely in the opportunity camp. I do understand we need to be thoughtful about how we use it. I don't think it's going to replace the power of the human, the relationship touch, you know, all the things that we've talked about. But as I've mentioned, I do think there's a massive potential that AI will help the relationship teams prepare better. I think we can identify needs earlier. I think we can spot patterns. I think we can reduce the admin burden. You know, there's so many things from an opportunity point of view that we can sort of really get into. But it supports what we already do. I don't think it replaces, and I don't think it can replace the moments where a client needs the human, needs that trust, needs empathy, needs judgment, needs accountability. That is the core of what we do. But looking at the service model specifically to pick up on that part of your sort of observations and your question, I do think there is so much that we're just scratching the surface around, because we are understandably thinking carefully about how we use it. We are proceeding with caution, but I do think from a servicing point of view, where we can improve customer experience, colleague experience, but also support our, identification of risk triggers. So fraud, already massively used across the banking sector to identify areas of concern, but also on the other hand to speed up responses, to make things more personalised, to make things more proactive. I think there is a huge amount that we are just at the beginning of, which is going to be fantastic to be part of over the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a really interesting journey to be. It must be a really interesting journey to be on.
Yeah, it is.
Testing out where those use cases are, because essentially, Claire, everything we've spoken about so far around personalization, using data to understand more about the customer, to enable us to be more proactive, to better serve and untap and unlock the potential of businesses within the market. AI can really be, the trigger that can take that to the next level and really unlock a huge proportion of growth within the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know whether you caught Anna Botin actually talking about how the whole of Santander must embrace AI. And she talked a lot about it in the sort of 2025 report presentation, just around this cultural change that she wants to see across the whole organisation. And once we get that cultural shift, the rest not becomes easy, but that is how we truly transform and take advantage of this amazing new technology. And, that is something that, it's not just said at the presentation, that is definitely felt throughout the organisation, this belief that if used properly, it will make us all just better at what we do. And so to your point, it does make it a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, 100%. It's completely, a cultural shift in a way, but a very exciting journey to be on, no doubt. Thinking about how, you spoke about earlier, identifying those customers with greater complexities, or, there being, businesses of an established size, but maybe on the slightly smaller end of commercial or lower mid-market, for example, who, have typically maybe been underserved. Perhaps potentially a loaded question there in a way, but do you see there's a particular cohort, maybe that segment in particular, where AI can be really powerful in helping to support? Perhaps do you see it differently? Which business customer groups do you think are going to see the biggest benefits in the short term and the long term in terms of the use of AI?
From a perspective of their own business or perspective of their banking relationships from their own business?
Yeah, both. If you could give an answer to both, would be really interesting.
So I think as I've sort of gone around meeting lots of clients in the commercial segment in particular, it's really interesting the range that you get response when you talk to them about AI. And there is still a lot just going, we know it's a massive opportunity, but we don't know where to start. We know it's a massive opportunity, but there's a lot for us to think about from a regulation, from a risk, from, all of that, to the other extreme of, they've thrown themselves in, there's massive opportunities already and massive efficiencies, etc. So I think we see a huge range across the segment in commercial, as I say. From a banking perspective, I don't think there's any one particular client where this is suddenly going to transform things. But I do think what it means is what we've identified is it's not about the size, it's about the complexity or the moments that the clients need extra support on. And I do feel like the use of data, the use of AI can only support us in getting ahead of those moments. So rather than it needing the client to realize they need help, we're ahead of that curve way before. And I think where this really comes into its own is where you've got maybe a business that's growing fast. Yeah. So there may be started off one-man band, and then all of a sudden, they get to that 1 million, 1.5 million turnover. So they get a bit more investment, and all of a sudden that hockey stick starts to happen. Often the data, it doesn't hit us until the transactions have really started to build up. But by then the client has needed our support way before. So I do see, if you were going to pin me on where is the biggest opportunity, if you're going to pin me to something, and I don't be a politician, I wasn't a politician in my answer, that's where I would say, if you can identify almost before the client realizes that they're growing so fast they need help, that's the moment. Because the biggest danger to those fast growing clients is they run out of cash and they damage their credit rating, they damage their, their credibility. And there's no need for them to do that. We can support, we can get in there at the point where they need it, and hopefully do some brilliant guidance and some brilliant sort of challenge around the decisions that they're sort of looking at.
100%. It sounds very exciting. I completely agree with that as well, for what it's worth, because what we see, and we sit very close to the data here at RFI, and we see that kind of emerging segment, so those businesses who are rapidly scaling, they do have the greatest level of openness to AI in financial services, but also for their own business use cases as well, because it helps to lift that administrative burden, and again help to facilitate a lot of processes which they may get stuck. They're growing so fast. There's not only operational complexities, they're outgrowing the pace of their staff, and all those types of factors, the types of advice that they may need as well. And I think across the market, we see that around 1 in 3 businesses are strongly supportive of AI in financial services, and a further 1 in 3 are sort of more lukewarm. But it really spikes to around 1 in 2 among that segment. Would that be something that surprises you?
No, that resonates completely. That absolutely does. And it's interesting sort of how people are embracing some of the solutions as well. That also is reflective. So I don't know whether you're aware, but we've developed a platform called RFI Global, which is specifically to try and support clients that are looking to grow internationally and just don't really know where to start. And there's a range of sort of tools on that platform for them. And what we're seeing is it is in that sector, that segment, that is really embracing that platform, embracing what that offers them. Even though, it's got as much for the larger clients that are, already trading internationally but want to expand. But we are really seeing that the smaller clients are sort of looking for those tools and those support.
That's really interesting and great to hear. And Claire, just briefly before we wrap up, there's so many interesting things that we've touched on so far. I would love to sit here and pick your brain and for much longer. But something we like to do at RFI is look into the future. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, how the business banking landscape is likely to change over the next 5 years. So say you and I are sat having a similar type of conversation in 5 years' time. What do you think are some of the things we're going to be talking about, given how service models and customer expectations and the role of, digital transformation, expectations of relationship managers? What do you think will define success over that period? What will we be talking about, do you think?
So I think we've still got much more to do around the use of data. So just tell us once, and we will reuse that in various guises. And I think from a consumer's point of view, there is a level of expectation which you've referenced, which is in all walks of your life you bring to the table. So because we're used to everything being on our phone at the touch of a button and easy, in one area of our life, we expect it in all. And in something like commercial banking, business banking, that can be quite difficult and complex with, the various regulation and things that we've got to navigate. But that's just something we're going to have to get much better at sort of finding a way to solve for. So that's definitely, got to be something that we're looking to the future and saying that will be a feature. And I think we've touched on so many of the things that I think will become part of just our normal. I think much more data driven, much more personalized. So I think those themes will emerge. But what we are seeing time and time again, and why we are winning clients over and over again, is their desire for a human, a desire for that interaction, a desire to, despite having the digital self-serve and the things that they expect, there is a real need at the key moments to have that human. And I don't see that that's just going to disappear. And so, yeah, I think it's just more of what we're doing, and some of those key journeys, just the friction coming down a little bit, so that it's more akin to some of the other areas of our life as a consumer.
Fantastic. Yeah, great closing insight, I would say. And I hope we're sitting in a couple of years' time looking back thinking that was a great prediction, and we got those things right. It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, it would. Mystic Meg.
Yeah, exactly that. Look into the crystal ball for sure. Claire, thank you so much for joining us on the latest episode of Banking Uncovered.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.